Welcome to the Avro Heritage Museum podcast.
This week we're talking to Pete Jenkins, one of the Lancaster cockpit guides at the museum. Pete recently fulfilled a lifelong dream of flying on an Avro Lancaster. The only way you can get a paying seat on an airworthy Lancaster is by going to the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum in Hamilton, Ontario, in Canada. Over 400 Canadian Lancasters, designated Mark 10s, were built at the Victory Aircraft Factory, some 40 miles away from the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum that Pete visited. They used blueprints sent over from Woodford, and the Packard Automobile Company built the Merlin engines using the designs from Rolls-Royce. We get the chance to join Pete on his memorable flight. I met up with him at the Avro Heritage Museum and asked him to begin by telling us how his trip had come about. And at the end, he talks about how he became a volunteer at our museum.
Yeah, I've had a lifelong interest in aviation, really, and in particular Lancasters, because I had an uncle who was a flight engineer on Lancasters. I never really got to talk enough to about it. I've had an interest in aviation. I was in the cadets at school, Air Squadron at university, and my ambition was to become an RAF pilot, actually. But I got married in my last year at university, so that didn't happen.
We're going to talk, obviously, about your amazing Canada trip. Just fill us in with the background. How did it come about?
Well, I'd had a taxi ride on Just Jane in East Kirby. That's about 12 years ago. And this, the Canadian Lancaster is the only one in the world you can actually fly on. So that was my ambition to do that. And I tried a year or so before it was booked up, but I got organised last year. Was on my PC to try and book the flight bang on time, which in this country was 15th of November at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which is 9 o'clock Eastern time in Canada. And as soon as I started trying to book the flight, the website froze because of the amount of traffic on it. So I was getting quite despondent, but then my wife managed to get through on her phone and she managed to book it for me using my membership number, which was amazing. The site was saying that the tickets were all sold out within 10 minutes because there's only a few hundred per year and it's the only Lancaster you can fly on in the world. So there's a great demand for it. But I was overjoyed when we'd actually got the confirmation we got the ticket, and then it was a question of planning a holiday in Canada to encompass it. It had to be in the Toronto area for about 7 days after the date of the flight, just in case there were weather issues or technical problems. So we took that into account as well. But, we had a 5.5 week trip to Canada because it's the only time we've been and we probably won't go again. So we made the most of it and tried to do the whole thing.
Before we talk about Lancaster, what else did you do on the trip, aviation-wise?
Well, we went to 5 aviation museums, including the Avro Canada Heritage Museum. That's at Calgary. That was very interesting.
Tell us a bit about that.
Well, they've been in business for, 30 years or so, and they're actually building an Avro Arrow, a 60% scale Avro Arrow, but it's supposed to be flying in about 10 years' time. They've been working on it for nearly 20 years, so it's a long-term project. It's having engines out of a Learjet, which they've already got, so it is, and it's mainly carbon fibre. It's a huge project, but it's very nice people at the museum. We're still in contact with one of them.
And what was their reaction at a visitor from the Avro Heritage Museum?
It was very fortunate we managed to get to go there at all because we arrived in Calgary on the Tuesday and they do maintenance and work on this aircraft on the Tuesday evening. So I contacted them and said, we're there this evening. Can you come along? Yeah. We'd only just arrived at the motel we were staying at, so we just dropped everything and shot off there. Put my Avro shirt on, of course, and so I had a really pleasant evening. Very, very kind, showing us around and that sort of thing. Wife bought me a T-shirt with the Avro Arrow on it, and he was very interested to hear that we've got a Avro Arenda engine here at the museum, and he wants to try and find out how it's arrived here. So I'm doing a bit of research on that for him. Been in touch with the Rolls-Royce Museum now, waiting for the RAF Museum to get back to me about it.
So start to tell us about the big day then.
We went a couple of days before to do a recce and tour the museum, so I wouldn't be distracted on the big day itself. But then I got a bit dressed up because I wanted to be smart. I borrowed an Avro tie-off Steve Abbott, actually. So I could look the part because I was representing the Avro Museum as well. We got down there in plenty of time, got talking to one or two of the other people who were going to fly in it, had some good conversations. And then we had to go for a briefing then, a pre-flight briefing, which was quite interesting. The main health and safety thing was because it was a very hot day, they had one of the escape hatches in the roof open to get airflow through the fuselage. And we were told in no uncertain terms, do not put anything outside of that hatch when the aircraft's doing 200 miles an hour because you'll lose it, including your head if you're not careful. So that was quite interesting. And we went out to the aircraft and we were told we had to be strapped in for takeoff and landing. But when we were airborne, we could move around. They would call us up and tell us when we could go on the flight deck and move around the fuselage.
Tell us about the aircraft itself, Pete.
Well, the Lancaster that they fly is named the Andrew Minarski Lancaster because he's one of the 4 Canadian Bomber Command Victoria Cross holders. And he was a very brave chap. The aircraft was going down in flames and he was about to jump out of the crew access door, actually, which isn't a particularly safe way to exit a Lancaster, but he couldn't get to the forward escape hatch. And he noticed that the rear gunner was trapped in his cockpit. So he got through the flames and tried to free him using the fire axe. And eventually he had to give up because he couldn't do it. So he stood at the access door and saluted him before he jumped. But by the time he jumped, his parachute was on fire. So he had a very heavy landing and only survived a short time on the ground. But amazingly enough, the rear gunner did survive, even though the aircraft made a crash landing with him in the turret, but he survived. He was carted off to a prisoner of war camp and told the story at the end of the war when Andrew Minarski was awarded the VC. Well, very well deserved. What a brave fella.
And this aircraft was manufactured in Canada?
It was, yes. It was one of the 423 that were built by Victory Aircraft at Malton near Toronto. One of the amazing differences between a Canadian-built Lancaster and a British one was that they had a stowage for snowshoes, which I saw in the one in the museum at Calgary. Yes, that was absolutely amazing. But the other interesting thing, which I've not mentioned before, the Lancaster in the museum in the Hangar Flight Museum at Calgary, it's got my name on it. I didn't show you the photograph of that, did I? On the port side of the cockpit, it's got the usual sort of nose art with a semi-naked lady and that sort of thing. But on the other side, it says Jenkins Express. So I couldn't believe it. So lots of photographs of that. So we're strapped in and listening to the engine start procedure. Every time an engine starts, it gets louder and vibrates more. And then we taxi out, do the engine checks, magneto checks, and then turn onto the runway. And the acceleration was quite rapid, actually. I was quite surprised. And we seemed to be airborne very quickly because it wasn't fully loaded. But the noise on takeoff was absolutely amazing. They provide you with ear defenders, which I didn't want to wear because I wanted to get the full experience, of course, but I had to put them on. It really was horrendous, the noise, which increases my respect for the aircrew who flew these things now, because putting up with that for 8 to 10 hours must have been dreadful, even with headsets on.
And did you see any differences in terms of, for instance, our own Lancaster cockpit here and the Canadian version?
There were quite a few differences, actually, yeah, because it's built to give a short distance, low-level pleasure flights. It's not got all the equipment in there, properly equipped bomber would have in. But I suppose that made it slightly easier to get around, but I must admit it is very difficult getting over the famous main spar. You really have to contort yourself, and I think I got over it 3 times because we took turns going up on the flight deck with the other 3 passengers. There's 4 of us altogether.
Presumably because of the noise, they can't really give you a commentary.
Not at all, no. We can't communicate other than by sign language with the crew and the other passengers, so you're just pointing and that sort of thing.
And how long are you airborne and where do they take you?
Well, we were airborne for an hour and a quarter altogether. First of all, we flew over Toronto. We were only flying at between 1,500 and 2,000 feet, so great view of the ground. It was nice and warm still. And we flew just past the CN Tower at about the same height as the top of the tower. It was amazing. And then we flew out over Lake Ontario and then to Niagara Falls, which was spectacular, really. We'd been on a coach trip to the falls the previous day and got very wet on the Maid of the Mist type thing. But seeing it from the air is much, much better.
How did it feel? Was it a bit of an emotional moment?
It was really, but there was so much to take in and to experience. I wasn't particularly overwhelmed by the emotion, but it was, I don't know, I just really enjoyed it. I've read so much about Bomber Command, the aircrew, my heroes, and it was just a fantastic experience altogether.
Do we know a lot about the history of that aircraft? It was manufactured in 1945.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, April. As far as I understand it was in storage for a while, and then it did service as a maritime reconnaissance aircraft for the Canadians. I think that's the story with it. It never actually saw active war service. I had mentioned to the pilots, there was a pilot and a co-pilot that had a bit of light aircraft experience, and they very kindly let me hold the control yoke for a few seconds, which was wonderful. It was really surprisingly heavy to move compared to a light aircraft, but it is a heavy aircraft, a Lancaster. And that was quite a thrill.
So all of that is added to your enthusiasm and love for the Lancaster, hasn't it, really?
Certainly,
yeah. Should we look at one or two of the photos?
Yeah.
You can talk people through some of the highlights on your photos.
That's the just inside the fuselage, 4 seats down the left-hand side with obviously non-standard little windows for us to look out of. They weren't there in the original aircraft. I've got the noise of the, if you can actually hear that, that's just taxiing out past the static aircraft in the park there. Huge crowd of people because it's actually Canada Day, which Canadians are a lot more patriotic now because of Trump's shenanigans.
Oh, huge crowd.
Feeling very proud. That's on the flight deck looking forward while the aircraft's doing quite a rate 1 turn. I've never been in an aircraft unstrapped before while we're doing quite steep turns. You do have to hang on. That's a selfie of me with the pilots. I couldn't really look any happier, could I?
Look like the cat that's got the cream.
Absolutely. That's a mid-upper turret. Canadian Lancasters had a Martin turret with 0.5s in it, which was slightly unusual compared to British ones. Yeah.
And of course, we didn't mention, but the engines were also made.
Yeah, Packard Merlins. That's right. Slightly more powerful than the Rolls-Royce Merlins. Yeah. That's flying past the CN Tower in Toronto. The recording noise on the phone just doesn't give any impression of how loud it actually was. It's flying over Niagara Falls. And then on the way back, we did a few fairly steep turns over people's houses that they must have known. And
it's a difficult experience to top, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's right. That's coming into land. Very smooth landing. You can see the streaks of lead over the top of the wings from the highly leaded high-octane petrol. We did get some fumes in the fuselage. That can't be healthy, can it, really? And my wife's taking that one of start-up.
It looks in beautiful condition.
It is. It's absolutely immaculate. Well, as it only flies for a couple of months of the year, and the rest of the time it's being looked after.
And for the moment, it's one of 2. The other one.
That's right.
Here,
Exactly.
Flight in the world, isn't it?
Yes, that's coming into land now, and that's after the flight photographs. We had to wear silly hats when we got back because it was the 80th birthday of the aeroplane. Yeah, I just felt quite honoured that I'd been able to fly in the thing on Canada Day because they are very patriotic nowadays. And the pilots who signed it, I got to sign my logbook, probably the last entry in my flying logbook that had actually been in the Lancaster, and his name he put in it was Leon Mad Dog Evans. That was hilarious. I don't know, he got a nickname like that, but and finally, I'd like to say it's just increased my respect for my heroes. We had a low-level flight and a perfect day, no problems at all, and the noise was horrendous. You can't imagine flying at 20,000 feet on oxygen. The noise and the vibration and the cold as well, of course. They must have been absolutely exhausted when they got back. That's even without being shot at.
How you came to be a volunteer at the museum, because the route that people take is often quite interesting.
Yeah. Well, I visited the museum 3 or 4 times actually, and then I retired 5 years ago. Had a few sort of projects to get on with, but when I'd done those, I had a bit of time in my hands, and I was very glad to be accepted as a volunteer here. Come on a Tuesday and a Friday now, and I really enjoy it. Gives structure to your week and keeps your brain and your body active. And you spend most of your time talking about subjects that you really enjoy with people, and the visitors are very interesting people to talk to. Had a very inspirational fellow last Friday called Stuart Boreham. He was the first disabled person to row across the Atlantic single-handed. Amazing character. So you meet people like that nearly every week,
Pete, it's been a great pleasure to talk to you, and thank you for sharing what must have been a wonderful experience. There'll be lots of envious people.
Yes. You're welcome. I can't stop talking about it or showing people my photographs, actually.
Thank you again to Pete for letting us share that unique experience of flight in a Lancaster. If you happen to visit Woodford on a Friday, maybe you'll be able to join him on one of his Lancaster cockpit tours. Sadly, of course, you remain on the ground. But you still get to experience firsthand the environment for those young men in Bomber Command who took the war to Germany, as well as enjoying Pete's insightful commentary. And at a ticket price of only £2, it's in a very different league, price-wise, from a ticket to fly on a Lancaster. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to your joining us for the next episode of the Avro Heritage Museum podcast. But for the moment, it's goodbye from me, Chris Beswick. Cheerio.
Make sure you follow us in your podcast app to ensure that you don't miss out on future episodes.